Dr. Bonnie Nish, Executive Director of Word Vancouver. I want to welcome you to our first ever Hybrid Festival. We're thrilled this year to be back in person after 2 long years of being online. We're hopeful that you're going to find the diverse programming that we've set out for you be something that you can find something of enjoyment, something that will educate you, something you can have fun with, bring your family to, bring a book to, and wander around and meet all kinds of authors. We want to also take a moment to thank all those sponsors who make this possible every year. The Canada Arts Council, Canada Book Fund, Canada Periodical Fund, Canada Heritage Fund, BC Gaming, Joseph Walks Foundation, the Hamver Foundation, DVBIA, and so many more. We also want to thank Penguin Random House for coming on board to make sure that we could have ASL interpreters on site this year as well. Please stop by, bring a book, find a book, say hello, and enjoy the day.
Hi there, my name is Dave Seaweed, and I'm the Indigenous Coordinator at Douglas College. I am from the Kwakiutl Nation, born and raised in East Vancouver. My father and his father before him are from Port Hardy in Alert Bay. I would like to acknowledge that I'm sharing with you today on the Kakite First Nation, which is the new Westminster Band, and thank Chief Rhonda Larrabee for supporting our work at Douglas College. As is my understanding, the Word Vancouver Festival spread throughout the Lower Mainland and Fraser Valley and online throughout North America and beyond. I would also acknowledge the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Coquitlam nations. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, where we live, we learn, we play, and we do our work. 95% of British Columbia, including Vancouver, is on unceded traditional First Nations territory. Unceded means that First Nations people never ceded or legally signed away their lands or gave them away to the Crown or to Canada. I have been asked why we acknowledge First Nations territory. Many organizations, governments, and school districts have adopted the practice of acknowledging traditional territories as a way to honor and show respect to the Aboriginal inhabitants of this land, the First Peoples. This practice enables wider municipal communities to share in Aboriginal cultures and leads to better relationships and understandings. Observing this practice connects participants with the traditional territory and provides a welcoming atmosphere to the land where people are gathering. We believe that acknowledging territory is a positive step towards reconciliation, which involves a commitment to learning about and understanding the real history of Canada's Aboriginal peoples and taking responsibility for reconciliation with Aboriginal peoples in Canada. The process of reconciliation is tied to the federal government's relationship with Indigenous peoples. The term has come to describe attempts made by individuals and institutions to raise awareness about colonization and its ongoing effects on Indigenous peoples. I would encourage you all, young and old, to do a little research about where you live, work, or go to school, and in turn, find out what First Nations territory you are on, so you can acknowledge when asked or for sharing at events. I wanted to conclude by mentioning the September 30th national holiday that began last year as National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th. In First Nations communities, we have been honoring Orange Shirt Day since 2013. The origins for the day come from a story about Phyllis Webstad's experience. She went to the mission for one school year in 73 and 74. She had just turned 6 years old and lived with her grandmother on the Dog Creek Reserve. They never had very much money, but somehow her grandmother managed to buy her a new outfit to go to the mission school. She remembers going to the store, picking out a shiny orange shirt. It had string laced up in front and was so bright and exciting, just like she felt to be going on to school. When she got to the mission, they took away her clothes, including the orange shirt. She never wore it again. She didn't understand why they wouldn't give it back to her. The color orange has always reminded her of that and how her feelings didn't matter, how no one cared, and how she felt like she was worth nothing. All of the little children were crying and nobody cared. We now wear orange shirts that always say, "Every child matters." I would encourage you all to wear orange shirts on September 30th and become an ally and partner for First Nations folks dealing with the residential school findings. I'm wishing you all the best during your time with Word Vancouver 2022. Stay strong and stay safe. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our opening night of Word, Meet Our Curators. I'm Allison Tedford. I am the Director of Marketing with Word Vancouver. And I am coming here today from the traditional territories of the Semath and Matsqui First Nations on the lands colonially known as Abbotsford. I'm going to be your host for this evening. And so if you'd like to show your appreciation for our fabulous curators as part of the show tonight, please feel free to type in the chat. You will not have access to your mic or your camera, but we are just so excited to have you all here. And, a big thank you to Dave for his words of education and empathy. I'm a little biased. He's my uncle. But I think he's fabulous, and I love that he gets to welcome us all today. You can purchase books of the authors that you'll see at Word Vancouver at Iron Dog Books, either online or in person at the bookstore, or at the Iron Dog table at Word Vancouver at SFU Harbour Centre next Sunday on September 25th. Without you, this free festival could not happen. If you haven't already, please consider making a donation via the link in the chat. And there'll be questions, time for questions at the end. I'll ask you to type them in the chat at that time. So I am just delighted to be joined by our fabulous curators this year. We'll get a chance to listen to them read and discuss their work this evening. This evening, we're joined by the LGBTQ2S+ curator, David Ly, and the Indigenous curator, Jaye Simpson. I'm delighted to introduce these readers and to talk with them tonight. David Ly is the author of Mythical Man, which was shortlisted for the 2021 Relit Poetry Award, and Dream of Me as Water, both published under Anstruther Books imprint at Palimpsest Press. He's also the co-editor with David Zamparelli of Queer Little Nightmares, an anthology of monstrous fiction and poetry, Arsenal Pulp Press 2022. David's poems have appeared in publications such as Arc Poetry Magazine, Best Canadian Poetry, Prism International, and The Puritan, where he won the inaugural Austin Clarke Prize in Literary Excellence. David is the poetry editor at this magazine. Jaye Simpson is an OG Cree Salto Indigiqueer from Sapota-Wayak Cree Nation. Simpson is a writer, advocate, and activist sharing their knowledge and lived experiences in hope of creating utopia. They're published in several magazines, including Poetry is Dead, This Magazine, Prism International, Sad Magazine, Green, Guts Magazine, Subterrane, Grain, and Room. They're in 2 anthologies, Hustling Verse 2019 and Love After the End 2020. Their first poetry collection, It Was Never Going to Be Okay, by Nightwind Editions, was shortlisted for the 2021 Relit Award and a 2021 Dane Ogilvy Prize finalist, while also winning the 2021 Indigenous Voices Award for published poetry in English. They are a displaced Indigenous person resisting, ruminating, and residing on the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations territories colonially known as Vancouver. So thank you both for being here, Jaye and David, and we're going to get them to do some readings from their work.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for that introduction, Allison. Hi, Jaye.
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Looking cute. So, Jaye, do you have a preference on who's go first, or I can start off if you want to?
Yeah, you have the new book. You've got 2 new books, actually.
I do. I just got the printed copies for Queer Little Nightmares, like literally hours ago. It's in the mail. It's coming.
It's in the mail. That's what they all say. It's in the mail.
It's coming. It's coming. So yeah, I will read from my newest poetry collection, Dream of Me as Water. Oh, thank God the title isn't backwards on the screen. So a follow-up from Mythical Man, growing on the themes established in that first book, but being a bit lighter and a bit more playful in my perspective. So I'll read a few poems to get us started. Dream. Inside the dream, a boy throws himself into an ocean. Inside the dream, water bleeds into his body's hollows. Inside the dream, bioluminescence lights the ocean floor. Inside the dream, the boy swims the ocean inside himself. Inside the dream, songs are half human, half serpent. Inside the dream, the boy who threw himself into the ocean wakes. I want to believe in healing crystals. I'm looking to feel better on a budget, picking up and putting down healing crystals one after the other, weighing my lack of belief against how badly I want to love myself. Maybe with rose quartz tinted when Aphrodite's blood spilled onto stone. But if I were a goddess, would I help those who go looking for it on a bargain table? 40% off a selection of methods to manifest protection and purification. Maybe it would depend on the sales and whether or not I get a cut. In this collection, I had a really fun opportunity to kind of explore sea creatures, which have always kind of fascinated me. And if I wasn't writing poetry, I'd probably be working on the ocean or something. So this is a poem called Ask and Answer. He asks when the octopus lost its shell, and it twirls the end of an arm, pointing back to the Mesozoic marine revolution. He asks when it would be okay for him to lose his carapace, but the octopus doesn't move, waiting to feel safe. He asks why the octopus lost its shell and it melts into a glass bottle to try and evade questioning. He asks why he needs to learn to be softer, so the octopus emerges to embrace him. He asks how the octopus lost its shell, begging to learn, and its skin flushes from mottled brown to yellow and orange. He asks how he can lose the ability to be so hard on himself, and the octopus wipes away his tears with the tips of its arms. So one of the creatures that I was like really obsessed with when writing this poem, this book, were eels, just because they're so weird and everything. So I didn't know how to write a poem without getting the image of eels kind of in a way that I wanted. So I just kind of put eels on the page, and this is kind of what happened. This is what happened. Eels. I get out of bed and cough eels into the bathroom sink. Baby eels squirm out of bloodshot eyes. I see eels when showering, writhing in water that falls off my body. Eels are caught in the cotton while I towel off. Eels are stirred into tea I sip, and my tongue is an eel. Eels squirm down my throat where they become words. I keep smashing eels into the keyboard to get them out of my mind, but I still feel them eeling through the grooves of my brain like yesterday, because yesterday was an eel, and my dream, a moray eel, biting my hands and pulling me into its second set of eely jaws. Dream of me. A lonesome blue half-moon, Beta swims above me. as I approach a mirror of water, heart beating in my throat, sweat beading on my brow, but my reflection doesn't move. The fish darts over my shoulder, flaring out its gill flaps, tail wide, body thrashing, trying to evoke a reaction. I want to run away, but instead scream, sending ripples through the ceiling, the betta's fins tearing, violently whipping around itself as I wake alone. In honor of working with Jay for the festival, I'm going to read a poem about a very special creature dear to our hearts. Godzilla 2014 brings a tsunami as he swims, shark-like, shaking theater walls with a roar that takes me back to childhood, mimicking the king of the monsters when he stomped Ghidorah's 3 golden necks. Now he rises from the water, crashing through Golden Gate Bridge, missiles exploding, fire engulfing gills that were redesigned to have his existence be more logical in our universe to help him breathe underwater. Godzilla, form altered when nobody had to change you. You would have always been understood, even when the nuances of how you exist were your own. Another source of inspiration, I guess, really influenced me when writing this book, though it's all about water and water creatures. I look to space a lot, just because it's so vast and you don't really know what's out there, but there's like signs of water. So this is a poem imagining, I think, what would live on one of the planets out there. Ocean Boy. At the bottom of an ocean concealed by ice, a long, muscular tail wraps itself around a pulsing orb of light that illuminates indentations on see-through skin where eyes might have evolved given the opportunity. He fantasizes about releasing a warmth he's always held on to, uncurling his tail and swimming further into the cold abyss to satisfy his curiosity for what else exists in the dark. Or else he could swim towards the light sensed from below, burst through a frigid surface where cryovolcanoes ooze, hoping his gills could handle the atmosphere. Since the compulsion to stay in one place has started to feel like a curse, and a galaxy with billions of stars is nestled in an ocean world, there are new horizons for a being with nowhere to go, trapped in a subsurface reservoir, responsible for holding unknown existences he's never questioned, now on the edge of the knowable. So because this book is a continuation in a very different direction for Mythical Man, I thought it'd be fun to kind of complete a narrative that happens in Mythical Man, where these 2 poems are near the end of the book. One titled Waking Together at the Beginning of the World, and then Walking Together at the End of the World. And I kind of wanted to tie that narrative together with this book. So this 3rd poem that completes the series is called Waking Alone in Another Dream, after walking together at the end of the world. The water ripples and I jolt awake on my back. 2 full green moons stare down at me. I'm alone when we're together, holding hands, walking across a liquid landscape. On my own, my imagination spins as many possibilities as there are constellations in this unfamiliar sky, but I still can't explain why you can't exit this dream with me. We shared unspoken promises to never be apart. But this is what happens when you believe in mythical men and walk with them at the end of the world. The moons are drowning in approaching sunshine, and I'm still breathing. The brighter it gets, the more clicks and whistles come from beneath the water. I bob up and down. The sea moves around me, its muscular hands holding my arms and neck, caressing before releasing, taking its haunted songs back to the deep. Without you, I can actually stay afloat, even if it's just in another dream. I think we'll do two more poems. This one is called Same Ocean. Years after being asked, "Where are you from?" I realized that I should have answered, "Did you know that when seawater meets freshwater in the ocean, a boundary forms between them? Though they appear to not be mixing, it does happen, slowly and over time. Two bodies, two places of belonging coming together. Despite efforts to keep us apart, to manifest an individual way of being, the parts that make up who we are, in a sense, are parts of the same ocean. There is no other way to think about this metaphor. Only a grandfather who rigged his boat with a tractor engine to give the family a better life, speeding across water with a few belongings, carrying an ocean's worth of culture that's filtered down generationally. When asked where I'm from, again, I'd say that a man once dreamed of more before turning his gaze towards the ocean, where two different bodies of water met and blended until he made landfall, attempting to walk forward, knowing that his existence was forever bound to two places. I'll close this reading with the title poem of the collection, the very last poem in the book. Dream of me as water. Just call me friend, and I'll hold my breath for you. Slink back into this cuttlefish lagoon, its neon pulses a warning to the stars that they will need to come down to the dark if the heavens want you back. Stay, lay with me in this murk, deep out of sight from the universe. There is nothing more soothing than returning to the water with only our unyielding imagination of whatever we want to be once we sense it's safe to reemerge. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, David. I just love your work. It's so inspired and beautiful. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share it with us.
Thank you.
I am excited, and this is the first time I've been able to hear David read, so it's really quite a treat. And I've seen Jay read before, and Jay is exceptional also. So really looking forward to hearing tonight's reading.
Thank you so much, and thank you, David. It was so lovely to hear your new work. I'm not sure if you heard the little cat, but we have a cat visitor. Okay, I'm going to start with some poems from, it's backwards because I hate the mirroring. Like, I know it just sends me into like a very irritated spiral sometimes. But I'm going to start with a couple poems from the collection and then some from the second collection of poetry that I've been working on. This is called Ngojuanong Peterborough. Lavender shortbread dipped in London fog foam, a quaint cafe appropriately named Black Honey, Ngojuanong, Peterborough. A rainy day signaled the end of my time here. I'd come to realize many things, that I loved too deeply, too ferociously, too hard, and I fell too often. That tiptoe, touch and go love affair, and I use the word affair because that's what it felt like, had been built on too many maybes and possiblies, and I'm confused. Indecisiveness, a fog of uncertainty, and at times I felt left in the dark and you embarrassed to even have had feelings for me. You said, I like the distance between us, and how just before you said that I had wanted to shorten the distance between you and I. I was and still am fault lines and fallen leaves, fragments and fissures, placed too much ideation in another, hoped to be whatever you wanted, didn't listen when I wasn't what you were looking for, and I blamed you for it. Wrong of me to ask you to want me, still I faulted you. The Sapphic poets didn't teach how to be accountable when yearning. To be upfront is a gambit. I want to be touched when the sun shone on my face just right, having just swum in the Pacific, brine making my skin salty and hair curly, the good kind of salt. And to feel like that instead of licking up sulfur from Mother Four's garden. You didn't know me and mine, between the strawberries and rhubarb, by the thyme and golden sage and Salem's rosemary, right by the cardamom plant and basil, when I was happier with what was and what wasn't. Never told you what I wanted. Pray you'd tell me you wanted more. That I know how to perform. Cruel the affection, severe the incision, and jealousy was never a good look on me. Lavender shortbread dipped in London fog foam. A quaint cafe appropriately named Black Honey. This ruin my design. So a lot of my poems are inspired by the culture around me and the culture that I use to cope. And one of them is Florence the Machine, like huge fan of Florence the Machine, where it's like a little bit annoying, but it's like a core of my personality. But this one is after Florence the Machine's Big God. It's called The End of a Friendship. I hope this sacrifice led you to believe again. My blood pooling at your feet will water your garden for years to come. This hallowed cost was more than enough. I hope my sacrifice kept the gods above appeased to let you go on and love each other. This was always meant to be a polyamorous tragedy, and I was always meant to play this part. Typecast in my manifestation, my final bow crowned with thistled tribulation. I have been the favorite specter of so many, knowing how to wail and cry whilst gliding through these red velour hallways. I've always known how to keen and quake in synchronous perfection. Isn't this what filled the seats in the first place? You were always meant to make it to the next saga, and I was destined to exit stage left for your character development. Jesus Christ, it hurts. You, always to get the favor of my sacrifice, benefit from this price paid. This wasn't always about you. It was about this burning heavenly heart I had to cut out. Let that be the final curtain call. No standing ovation in the final act. Let this be the way I go. The sacrifice not to be in vain, nor was it for you either. Hearts often do belong nailed to crosses now. As I turn putrid in the unrelenting sun, which beats upon my downturned brow, you finally think of laying me to rest. Drive a coffin nail into my left hand. Place labradorite in my right. Fill my sallow chest with wild strawberry and rose plants. Cover my eyes with prairie wildfire. Lay Seneca root at my feet. Let me face east, and do not let me burn for too long. Jesus Christ, this hurts. I am going to do a poem that's really special to me. I've got 2 more poems in the collection, and I'm going to jump to the new stuff. Urban Indians in the downtown east side is really important to me. As I was born in Vancouver and my mom lived in the downtown east side, and so much of my family still does. Had a dozen foster parents tell me to run from my mother's truth. The track marks up her arm, shy away from the streets they said ate her alive. It wasn't until I had rewilded onto the very streets that I recognized that I kept her alive. Harm came from the Munya men, lurking in the alleyways, asking for something more, like ligament or limb, wrap their fleshy digits around Ikwe throat, squeeze life like pressing orange for juice. Most of my mom's sisters are dead like her too now, caught in the crosshairs of murdered or missing. Their children are working, and I make sure to say hello to my cousins. We all picked up our mother's work eventually. I've become a regular at the funeral parlor on Hastings, burying parent and child every other week. Don't have tears left once home. Save them for longer nights. Remember, there are Indian children who need to eat still. I ran onto Main and Hastings, cried out in anguish. This place called cold, called heartless, called monster and maw was never the culprit, and the blame was never to be my mother's or her sister's. Rather, the machines of genocide placed here by the illegal government voted in by our now neighbors. I found truth. The mythos was fabricated, and there will always be funerals to attend, Indian children to feed. This last poem I wrote after a very fateful LA trip, and it's very interesting, and I had a lot of feelings about it. And I was talking to my friend about desirability, and it was a really fruitful conversation, and I really enjoyed the breakthrough that we made. And so I wrote this, but it's after Florence the Machine's Sky Full of Song. In a city without seasons, it keeps raining in LA. Another white boy on Tinder tells me I look incredible in every single one of my photos. Attempting to be Orpheus, I do not want to be Eurydice. I fear I will be at the end of this. 4 months later, Orpheus sings me a song in his bedroom about feeling undeserving of affection and love, turning me into dust on many couches and many beds. Shame follows attraction to whomever's gaze falls upon their body, turns their dicks to stone, and shortly after, their hearts. I feel like a collision of Grecian warnings. To want is deserving of punishment and enough, and I cry from Burbank to Little Thailand, from Venice Beach to Los Feliz. I couldn't hide from the thunder in a sky full of song. I want you so badly, but you could be anyone. Gather myself from dust, Hades' restitution denied as I climb out. Shame forgets the desire to continue, want for everything I never had. Orpheus could not keep me. Raindrops, obscene in their greatness, splatter our faces, refreshing reminders of Persephone's mercy between the forever of LA, city of ever-blooming flowers. The moon, low-bellied at 3:12 a.m. as my friend and I are driven to LAX. Shadowy palms in the amber haze of streetlights and illuminated billboards remind me desirability belongs to no one, only to the ideas of people we create in our head. I can always justify a reason to shed tears during a flight, be it the malleable nature of wanting or the severity of delusion. Sometimes you want to be wanted so badly, you forget yourself. So I'm going to read some new poems. But first, I'm going to water. I'm going to break the fourth wall. So these are all a part of my second collection of poetry, which I'm not going to be spilling any information about that tonight. So sorry, David. Scorpio moon. After Black Belt Eagle Scout Scorpio moon. The moon's also in Scorpio right now. So I have dreamt of you 1,000 times, and still it is never enough that I can't run backwards into the hazy before. The paradox of raising oneself begged for another chance, and here I find you, childlike wonder, unhindered by the obscenity of premature grief. I've embraced your slight frame every chance I get, and you smell of L'Oreal Kids strawberry smoothie shampoo, comforted by the familiarity of stolen girlhood. I've carried you just as long as you carried us. A family, unforgiving and far too young to be changing baby diapers, although you find yourself mother and child entangled. Oh, child, I dream of us together, and no reality could bear the responsibility of the both of us together. Instead, I find myself chasing this shifting starlight miracle. We exist still, and you survive it all in the end. I'm going to read 2 more poems. This one Yeah, it's called I Do Not Dare Call It Refuge. Home, a wayward theory begs actualizing beyond which I can comprehend. What constitutes the difference between these cracking walls now in this apartment and the dampened ones in the basement of then? She sold the house I haunted, bought a new one with that thieved childhood of mine estimated at $3,000 a month. The place I first spoke to the little people, politely refused their boons and took the loss. Where grief is tolerable, I can't say I'm familiar, but I know well enough how comfortable I am at the vestige of losing in silence. My right fingertips numb, leaching to my elbow, these burnt nerves struggle at locating ridged skin on my breast, a scar fumble along to some other haunting melody instead. I built a place somewhere outside of this, a vastness I can't name. I dare not call it refuge. In the years of held breath, I learned there's no one coming, because no one believed you, a child, should be able to grieve. Deny me this reconstitution. I've begged to burn all the places that couldn't contain me, a child full of wanting and found undeserving of it. Why should I realize myself home when I'm too preoccupied haunting a place she cares not for? The short answer is, it is not because I am deserving of. Rather, that home is an idea we make, and I still can't convince the child I was otherwise, no matter the lies they were told. There's an auditorium in my head, uncomfortably silent, filled with the knowing witnesses throughout the years, evidence enough that no one was coming. Still, I long to belong to a place, bound in the many possibilities, sworn in by the endlessness of tomorrow. I think I've got one more poem in me. Um, okay. This, uh, mm, we'll see. You, a pool of unfathomable depth, and I, a wanderer in the wayside of regret, tend to the wounds of my own foolishness at the reprieve you don't even know you grant. If I could sit at the bottom of the very end of you, I would happily drown watching the world turn to ash and dust. But I make my living telling the world of all the hurt I have accrued, never the hurt I could do, and oh, what wasted potential that is. A person isn't a well, or a body of water, or a thing I should take and take, nor am I the embodiment of all the grief left unfelt at Glenhaven Memorial. Instead, I am selfishness. I want so badly for everything and nothing, the immortality of discontent before me. Let's not lie to one another. I have come to quench my thirst, and you look, oh, so refreshing. A decision I would sooner like to regret, but here I am, parched and petty. I can sing you a song or write you a poem if that'll make the break feel less broke. I find myself lost in the turmoil of my own want. This soured flesh shedding off, fluttering away like some overwhelmed leaf tattered by my hands. This body more than enough, but never for me. The gods are asleep, and I can show you how destined our skin can be when scattered around us. What does it matter when these gilded halls are just an illusion of each other that we constructed with our own bruising fingertips? I've seen this in each body in my bed, the friend beside, or the hostility across from me. We are weavings of forced perception and continue to entangle messy language uttered so carelessly. You take just as much as I do, sank your teeth into neck and wrist so indiscriminately, rather foolish to think of us saints instead of a temptation embodied, sewn soft flesh on heathen bones. What is it to them, the cost of all their failures painted before them, or the perversion of scripture we took and took and took, when there was nary an offer? Theft of stolen access is simply return, no? My pen never lifts from this page. Oh, the things I can say between us. Beasts grown comfortable from these high perches, and this demonic ascent heralding just that. I will not lie about wanting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay. That was so amazing. It was such a pleasure to listen to you read. So Jen Currin was intended to host tonight, but was unable to be with us. So I am stepping in, and she left some very insightful questions that I'd love to ask. The first one being, we wanted to start with a question about writing and healing, because it's one of the themes that circulate in both of your collections. What does it mean to write healing? David, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think for me at least, what it means to write to heal, I think what I learned is that it's an act of just sitting with yourself and just being kind of with your thoughts and kind of just like a lot of reflection and either like coming to terms with what happened or what could change in a way. So, and I think that's the cool thing about writing poetry is that it really, for me at least, it forces you to really be present with yourself and your thoughts, which is oftentimes quite uncomfortable. But when you're doing that through poetry, it's a way to kind of work through those uncomfortable thoughts, I think. And in the end, once you have that poem out, it kind of feels like a release that you've kind of got all those worries and other complicated emotions out. So I think that's, in my case, that's what it means for me and how I've experienced it. It was different with Mythical Man as opposed to how it was with Dream Moving Is Water. Mythical Man was a bit more a kind of just like a spill all, kind of tell all in very like in compared to compared to Dream is Water, very kind of blunt ways. Whereas Dream Moving is Water, I kind of was able to kind of take a step back and be a bit gentler with myself and what was being revealed through the poems. And I had, in a way, it was a lighter experience. But in both writing Mythical Man and Dream Moving is Water, they were both quite healing and in very kind of opposite ends of the spectrum kinds of way, where Mythical Man was quite heavy and it was a bit more comfortable sitting with those thoughts. But Dream Moving is Water was lighter and much more preferred, I think, than how I started with the first collection. Does that answer your question or Jen's question? Hopefully.
Yeah, I think so. That was lovely. Thank you. How about you, Jay? Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, whatever I do and whatever I write is going to feel good, even if it hurts in the moment. Um, but for me, I think the first collection is definitely a lot of acknowledgement about healing, and it's a lot of work on that front. And I wanted it to be a focus on that um, surviving, but then also like building a space to thrive for kin. And I'm moving past that because I'm wanting vengeance. Like that is the era that I'm really in and what I want. And the fact, one of the things that's just really grinding my gears right now is the fact that like we're getting a holiday on the 19th over a genocidal white woman's death, but we're not getting a holiday over acknowledging residential school, which has over 10,000 like children who passed because of that. And so it's like whose grief gets to be validated and whose life is considered more of a public mourning. And it's like, okay, so a white woman who represents the colonial state and therefore genocide against my people, her death gets to be acknowledged and we get a day of rest. But my kin who are buried in unmarked graves don't. And so for me, writing to heal now looks like to like pretty much transfigure into like a wolf and just like eat people, which is maybe revealing a little bit too much about book two, but um I think it looks like many different things. And I think there needs to be more space for the ways in which our rage can be a manifestation of our healing. And sometimes our inner child like needs to be able to throw things and needs to be able to just rage. And I think um, that's something I think about. And I still want to write tender poems. That's still something that's very, very important for me. But also, I need to remind people that I have teeth.
I love that. Thank you, Jay. That's so animated. So could each of you discuss the relationship for you between poetry and autobiography? Does anyone like to go first this time?
I can go first for that. I think one of the things for me is poetry as oral storytelling is its root with me in spoken word. And then going into publication it was my first opportunity to write and tell my own stories. And so with that, one of the many teachings and learnings that I picked up was to tell my own story unless I had explicit information and consent and followed the protocol of telling other stories, like culturally based stories, is something that protocol is necessary in. But for me, my poetry has always been autobiography and my own story. And so I always think about that in how I kind of treat it like a song. And so if my song is to be my own, it has to truly, deeply be my own. Um, but I find it interesting because there are some poets who don't write in that kind of way or write with a deeper metaphor. Um, I remember I was at a poetry event and this one poet had a whole book about like the mounted police at Central Park in New York. And I was kind of just like a little bit, I was like, okay, by all means. But um, for me, the poetry that I get drawn to also is autobiographical because it's so lyrical and so beautiful. And it's one of the things I really liked about what drew me to David with his first chapbook, Stubble Burn, which is iconic, by the way. Love, love, love it. Um, but I don't think I'll ever write poetry that isn't like autobiographical for me. It's so relational and I don't want to break them up. They're never going to be broken up. They're end game for me.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Jay. David, could you speak to the relationship for you between poetry and autobiography?
Yeah, it's a weird one, I guess. I would agree with Jay's sentiment in that I don't think I would ever write poetry or otherwise in another genre that wouldn't be autobiographical to a certain degree. What I found interesting when first getting published with the first book, Stubble Burn, and then Mythical Man, Stubble Burn being the chapbook and Mythical Man the full length, is that I felt comfortable enough, revealing autobiographical details on the page, but I found it very interesting that the reaction to that was people either wanted to know if it was real or if it actually was about me, and I equal parts enjoy getting that question and equal parts just hate it. In that I like it because I like how I can play within that kind of gray area with poetry and kind of blur the lines between what is real about me, more or less, or what I've experienced, and what is imaginary, mythical. In a sense, there's always that kind of blurriness in my writing, I find, and I just really enjoy kind of playing in that ambiguous space of what is truly real and what is not. I find it funny that a lot of the poems that people really gravitated towards in Mythical Man were ones that were not real, but people thought they were. And the ones that were real, people just want to know if they were kind of, but they weren't as I guess memorable as some of the made up ones. I enjoy just kind of tricking you guys, not more or less, what is real on the page or what is not. It's fun playing at that, and I think that's the kind of joy I get in writing poetry because you have such a small space to reveal either as much as you want or as little as you want. Sometimes one serving the other, and it's quite beautiful and quite fun. Yeah, Jay's nodding their head, agrees with me. I think we both kind of have that playfulness in us when it comes to expressing us on the page, right, Jay? We love keeping people on their toes and wondering if we are real on the page or not. Never going to tell you, but Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's definitely fun to get drawn in to that and try to guess what is real and what is fiction. But that's a really great insight. Thank you. So because we're getting near to the top of the hour, just want to see in terms of if there's any questions from the audience that we can field before we close off. So I would just invite if anybody in the audience has a question for Jay or David to please pop it in chat. I see Shannon asked if there isn't there emotional truth in the fictional narratives. I thought that was an interesting question.
I think there can be. Again, my biggest question or counter question to that is who's the author of that emotional truth? And I think about it in ways in which we see white authors writing about marginalized voices, and then white folks relating to or feeling emotional truth from that versus the fact that it's not grounded or based in the structural and like lived experience truth. And in that sense, I'm kind of like, if that's fiction, it's not true enough to me. And so that's how I would like, that's how I think. I'm very critical of how I consume literature, um, given the nature of white voices predominating these spaces and telling our stories. And but I would also say that like um, there are some narratives that I share that are like David said, that are like I like to say if the shoe fits. And so if it hurts or it feels like a particular oof, it may not be based in one particular experience. Therefore, I'm not tattling on someone. And it still is a little bit more fictional because it doesn't have any grounded citations, but it still fits and it still is the situation. But I think there is some truth, but it requires nuance in those situations.
That's definitely true. Thank you, Jay. And David, what is your thoughts?
Just that was a very beautiful answer, Jay. Thank you for capturing that so eloquently, and it resonates with me completely. But yeah. So just give me a moment to get my thoughts together here. So Shannon's is referring to what I said about people being drawn to the fictional poems. So the thing with writing for me, writing about fictional poems is I feel like they don't really work for me unless there is at least some thread that is tied to me in them. So like dropping a little bit of autobiographical kind of nuance into the piece. And that's kind of where I ground that, I guess, what you call emotional truth. Um, it's just kind of like a bit of truth about me in a fictional narrative, but that doesn't make the narrative any less like poignant, or less fake or real. But yeah, I don't know. I think in order to tell like a really compelling fictional narrative, there has to be some um, bit of truth to it, either from the writer's personal experiences or, with what Jay was referring to, is incorporating other truth with consent and doing it in a respectful way. Then that's when you can have that emotional kind of come to light.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I guess one last question. And I guess this one is from me, maybe a little bit of a surprise, but like, what are you most excited about for Word this year? What is the experience that you hope people will take from the brilliant curations that you have assembled for everyone to enjoy? Jay, if you want to start.
Sure. So I accrued a little bit of some like Indigenous superstar names. And so I'm very excited for the first panel with Connor and Molly. It's like we're talking about uncensored bodies, and we're going to be, because both of them write very explicit content that's really fun and fresh and had me like shocked, and I was just clutching my pearls. I was like, oh my goodness. And then my friend Billy Ray Belcourt was like, you also write very similarly. So I was like, a hypocrite, but like a very surprised hypocrite. And so I loved it so much. And then the second one is about Indigenous humor with Brandy Bird and Joshua Whitehead. And then the third one is about queer Indigenous futurism and rejecting traditionalism as our future. And that's with Ariel Twist, Tyler Pennick, and Justin Ducharme. And so I'm like so excited because all of them are so very, very, very fun. So I had to name drop every single one. So I can't wait.
Well, we can't wait either. And we're so grateful for you coming up with such great programming. And we're just really excited to get to watch it all. And how about you, David? What are you excited about? What inspired you in making the brilliant selections that you made?
I think I just really wanted to go full force ahead and heavy on the poetry because I just feel like there just needs to be spaces to highlight different aspects of the craft. So I'm very excited for the Queering the Chapbook event. That I just feel like chapbooks just need to have a bit more of a stage presence. And so I'm very, very curious to see kind of what the talent that I curated for that event has to say about kind of expressing queer identities in a chapbook form, which is a lot smaller than a full-length collection. So you have a very limited amount of space. So what is kind of the process that behind that makes you kind of select the poems you do to convey queerness or to talk about your own queerness in a very short amount of space? And I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. Another one that I'm very excited for is the Between Worlds event that I curated with emerging and established Asian Canadian writers who are queer, and we are going to talk about the intersections of those kind of identities and this feeling that we don't quite belong to one world or the next, being raised in traditional Asian households and coming from very Asian families, but raised in a very Western setting, but also throwing that layer of queerness on top. It really kind of just pulls us apart internally. And I'm very excited to hear what those authors have to say for that. And then lastly is the illustrating queer experiences in the picture book event. I think that one's going to be very light and fun because I just never personally seen queerness being represented in children's books growing up. So I'm very curious to talk to Stacy and Jillian for that event. Should be fun.
Awesome. Well, we're just so delighted to have both of you and so honored to get to enjoy the programming that you've put together and to get to have this evening with you both and get to enjoy your brilliance. So thank you so much for joining us and for being part of Word Vancouver 2022 and being part of that, coming back to in person and also being able to enjoy from afar so that people all over the world can enjoy programming like this. So thank you very much for being a part of it. If you are looking to buy these great books, you can get them at Iron Dog, and there will be a link in the chat. And thank you to all of the staff and volunteers at Word Vancouver for making this possible. There are plenty more events happening, so make sure you check out the complete listing at wordvancouver.ca. And just as a flag that some of our children's programming for this week has changed, so if you're planning on attending that, do check out some of the changes. And yeah, we're just really excited to have everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And have a great evening and a wonderful festival, everybody.
Thank you. See you all out there.
Thank you, Allison. Bye.
Bye.